Welcome, dear students. In the current session, we would focus upon the standard literary language during the Renaissance period. The objective of the session is that by the end of this session, you would have a know-how of what kind of literary language was being used during this period and how far it was standardized. Well, my dear students, Renaissance is a period of time when a standard and recognizably modern English had already, started developing. It was almost towards its completion as a standard language. The effect of the Great Wall shift was to bring the pronunciation within a measurable distance from what we have today. So, all those, problems and the crudeness of language or the uncertainties and ambiguities that were related to language were gradually removed over the time. And now, from the modern times, this Renaissance period is at such a measurable distance in terms of the changes that we can, from here, the modern times, easily relate to, the development of English and certain characteristics of present times English with the period of Renaissance. The influence of printing press and the efforts of spelling reforms also resulted in the form of, written English that, is far more stabilized, far more, standardized, and that has, far more fixed structure. And a modern reader can easily relate to, the English of Renaissance. While reading, there might be slight, hitches, there might be slight discomfort with reference to certain sounds or with, as they are written or with reference to certain structures. But overall, the reader finds it very easy to read Shakespearean text. There were certain characteristics of the language of this period that helped in standardizing the literary language. We need to distinguish between English language and literary English language. The language that was spoken, if we are clear about that it had these kind of features, it had new vocabulary, it had a fixed grammatical structure, its syntax was fixed, etc., then we can understand, of course, how it would have a relationship with the literary form of the language. Here, since we are talking with particular focus on the literary form, the new vocabulary that had been established, the fixed grammar, and, other changes that had come, they were quite visible in the writings of those times. If we look at the works of Renaissance period, for example, if we look at the writings of Spenser and Shakespeare, we would find a writing style, we would find a variety of English writing, rather, I would say, that was very much the same everywhere in all the contemporaries. So, all of them, they would use a standard variety of language free from the, the idiosyncrasies of the areas they belong to. Like in Pakistan, we have, if you are familiar with this variation of accents or even the word choices of, for instance, if we take the example of Urdu or even of Punjabi for that matter, as it is spoken in Lahore and in Faisalabad and in Rawalpindi, as it moves from one area to the other, the accent changes, the pronunciation changes, some word choices, they are different. So, these are the choices within the dialects. But the standard Urdu language, for instance, is a particular standard language. And, all the writings that we find in, Urdu language, we find them written in that. Same is the case here, with the English language that was written during the Renaissance period. And, be it Shakespeare or Spenser or any other contemporaries, all of them used the standard variety. So, my dears, for example, Sir Walter Raleigh might speak with a broad Devonshire pronunciation, where he belonged to, the area he belonged to. Or for that matter, Spenser and Shakespeare may have traces of their, local dialects of, Lancashire or Warwickshire from where they came. But actually the language that they wrote was the London Standard. This London Standard was free from all those dialectic, impact, or, the varieties of pronunciations affecting the spellings, or the language choices, the vocabulary items, as well as the syntax. It is due to this that Puttenham in 1589 reminds us. He reminds us of what? He says, "Herein we are already ruled by the English dictionaries and other books written by learned men, and therefore it needeth none other direction in that behalf." So, what he tried to claim was that a standard has been set by books and dictionaries and documents, and we do not need any directions further. We can just follow them, and that can be the standard of the language. However, there were some parts or some aspects of the language that were yet unsettled, that were still going on through the process of change. This was happening mostly in the spoken language. As far as the written language was concerned, I think this was the 16th century where it was a fully standardized, stabilized, systematic language. Actually, the regularization of spellings in this written standard can be seen as early as the mid-15th century, and then through the 16th century, the process was completed, and finally we had the form and shape of a language, at least in the literary texts, that was standardized.